What's going on, guys? Jeff here for Mad Hatter's Reef, and today we're going to be taking a look at all of my corals. Welcome back to another episode of Mad Hatter's Reef, and this is where I talk about everything reef tank related. So if you love reef tanks like I do, make sure you smash that subscribe button and don't forget to mind the bell. This week we're going to be taking a look at all of the corals that I have in the Waterboxx 70.3. So let's jump into it. All right, folks, so today we're going to be taking a look at the Waterboxx 70.3 and all the corals that I have in it. I do have a cold, so you're going to have to bear with me with the sound of my voice. But today what I want to do is kind of capture everything that I have going on as far as corals go in the Waterboxx. So we're going to break it down by section, talk about the corals that I have in those sections, and give you guys a really good idea of what I am working with and what I'm trying to achieve with this tank. So let's jump into it. All right, so this is the top shelf portion of the aquascape of the tank, and what I want, or at least the vision that I had when I built this top shelf, was to fill it up with a bunch of different SPS corals. And right now I have some stylophores in here, some Passilloporas. I also have a couple of aquaporas in the mix. There's a digitata right here towards the top that has had a struggle in the time that it's been in the tank, but currently, with the exception of this guy right here in the front, all of them are looking great. They got some good polyp extension going on and seem to be doing pretty well in the tank. Now this is a really high flow section of the tank. That gyre pump, the lone gyre pump in the Waterboxx, is just blowing across the shelf. So I go back and forth whether or not that I have too much flow over here or not enough. But for the most part, a lot of the SPS corals up here are doing pretty well, with the exception of this guy and this one right here in the front. That was my Raspberry Delight Worldwide Coral Frag from an eon ago, and it has really good polyp extension, but the colors have kind of gotten a little bit dull. I have been adding some amino acids to the tank to kind of help with that, and trying to dirty up the tank a little bit, but for the most part it has kind of faded in coloration. It was actually doing better in the 220 gallon as opposed to what it's doing now. Just below that we still have the Lobo, which is purple and green. Doesn't look great right now. One of my favorite Lobos that I've ever had. Definitely a nice little piece. Right next to it, the Duncans, doing very well still. They've gotten a lot thicker and beefier in the time that they've had in the tank, and still doing very well. Down here, just below the Duncans, we have the Leptoceras, which I have a love-hate relationship with. That is a tangerine Leptoceras, which seems to be doing pretty good right there. I've actually even seen some pretty good flesh extension on that coral, to the point where I actually bumped into the glass once and I actually saw the flesh of the coral actually kind of suck in a little bit, which was pretty crazy. Down in the lower right-hand corner of the tank, there's a couple things going on. We have a tooth coral right here, which these guys have some pretty extensive tentacles, up to, I would say, 4 inches, depending on how much growth it has. So that's something that you definitely, if you get a tooth coral, there's pretty good sweeper tentacles on this guy, so that's something that you definitely want to take into consideration. Next to that we have a chalice with red base and yellow eyes. Pretty big piece of chalice that I got on this latest shipment. Just behind that, a coral that was on the top 10 hard to keep corals, the sun coral, which the lights are kind of dimming down right now and you can kind of see, I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit, some of those polyps are starting to extend out. The coral seems to be doing fairly well. Haven't fed it too much yet. I have been feeding it a little bit here and there. I think I should be a little bit more diligent with it. I think that I need to make a run to the dollar store and get another turkey baster so I can start feeding that guy up some, but definitely a cool coral that I've been wanting to have for a long time. And then we have a couple zoanthids. We have a platy down here in the corner that's been doing really well. This empty frag plug that we have there, just behind it you can kind of see a recordia that broke off. I got two recordias that are just kind of floating around. Those guys are probably going to get scooped up and put into the frag tank system here, and I'm going to start fragging those guys up. Then just past the sun coral, there's a Cephastria frag that is absolutely blown up. It was just a little nug of a coral, and it is doing very, very well. It has some good polyp extension. It's a really good spot for that. They don't really prefer a lot of light. I do have some frags that are out in the open, but that one definitely seems to be taking off, so I might have to move these other frags. So probably the most obvious of the corals is this Goniopora that's right here. With some pretty good extension. Seems to be doing really well. You have some small polyps in the mix as well, and that was on my top 10 hard to keep corals. We're gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna let it hang out in the tank for a little bit and see how it does. Just beyond that, I actually probably should find a different spot for this frag, but just beyond that, it's actually kind of hard to see. You can see it kind of sticking through when the Goniopora kind of waves a little bit, is some candy apple reds that are doing very well in the tank. They're actually one of the very first frags that I put in the tank. I got them from the Keep On Reefing Expo, which I've talked about that in other videos. Doing really, really well. I think I bought it with 8 heads. No, it wasn't 8. It was like 6 heads, I think, when I bought it. And it now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, and that was since what, April? So that's doing really well. These kind of mint chocolate zoanthids just to the right of that, doing really well, very big. And this blasto's starting to show some new heads. We have another platy here that's a liquid turquoise platy that was a pretty fresh cut when I got it. Seems to be healing up pretty good. Acan, I'd call that probably a ultra Acan. I'm not sure I would say it's a rainbow, but that guy tends to fluctuate quite a bit. And just next to the Goniopora is those Aoi Zoanthids that I got from Gabe back at Reefapalooza. Those things are doing great. Actually was trying to see if I got some new growth going on. That Goniopora seems to be bothering them a little bit, so I might have to move those guys. Then we have Alveopora right next to the Goniopora, which the Alveopora is very similar in appearance to Goniopora, and it's a little bit more hardy, has kind of the same aspect of it. Obviously you can see the difference between the two of them. The one thing about Alveopora is that it is extremely, I would say, emotional. It's an emotional coral that when I got this one did actually a lot better than the first one that I got, which I eventually sold on Mr. Reef Box, but this one wasn't quite as finicky as the first one. When I dipped it, it took 2 days for it to open up, but they are, from what I understand, extremely hardy, do very well in aquariums, and kind of have that Goniopora feel, and can often be mistaken as Goniopora, but they tend to be a little bit more controlled. As you can see, the Goniopora next to it is pretty beefy right now. Just next to that have a Favia Coral, and then right here in the front, this guy, absolutely awesome. Let's take a better look at this. So this trachea was a pleasant surprise, and I'm going to be getting more of these. I'm actually going to be bringing I signed up for my first frag show, and I'm definitely going to put a video for you guys together and kind of documenting that whole experience. I'm going to be going to the Fragtober Fest in Connecticut. I'm going to have a table. I'm going to be setting up, selling some corals down there, and I'm going to be getting some more of these guys. Absolutely blown away by the quality and the value with these guys right here. Definitely a beautiful trachea. It's simple in its coloration, but for the price, I'm definitely very happy with that. Towards the back, you have that Interstellar white stripe mushroom that I talked about in a previous video, which it was on a plug, broke off, and it migrated its way towards that acan in the back, and it seems to have settled in there. So the benefit of that, it's a relatively high price tag mushroom, but now I have two of them, and I'll be able to sell them for a pretty decent profit. Just in front of that Interstellar, another blasto that seems to be a little bit more towards the bluer coloration than the very pastel one that we have towards the left of the tank. Just in front of that, have a frag of Twizzlers Zoanthids that I've had in the 220 gallon. Now they're in the Waterboxx. I have a patch of them in the 220 gallon tank, and they seem to be kind of traveling along with me. Then there's the other Sophastria frag that I talked about, which has some pretty good extension coloration going on right now, but I think I'm going to move it to a shaded spot because that other one that I have towards the right is just blowing up right now, and it definitely is looking really good. Just to the left of that, another Pallady is the Raging Bull Pallady. This thing is absolutely phenomenal in its coloration. Definitely keeping that. I'm not selling it. Eventually, if I can get more or grow it out, which this stuff doesn't really grow that fast, but I'm going to be keeping that one. That's the hard part of selling corals, and then working with some of these wholesalers and being a hobbyist myself. I find that a lot of this stuff I just want to keep. Then just to the left of that, my two Scolies. These guys, well, one of them's up for sale on the website currently. The war painted Scolie is up for sale, which he's looking a little flat at the moment. And just next to him is a unique, but it's more bleeding than apple. There's flecks of green, as you can see in there. It's not really picking it up, but it kind of is. The war painted is more of a reddish orange, and then the apple, the bleeding apple, is definitely a more of a orangey coral. These guys are absolutely amazing. Active feeders. I feed them usually this time of day, sometimes in the morning depending on the situation, but I've been feeding them Coral Frenzy, and that's kind of brought out some, definitely more so in the war painted Scolie, brought out a lot of the teal colorations that you can kind of see right there on the front. Oh, get my finger out of there. But you can see the teal colorations at the front, then a little bit on that back rim. Absolutely beautiful corals. I will never not have Scolies in my tank ever again. I will always have Scolies. They very easy to keep. They actually were on the top 10 for easy to keep corals. If you feed them, they are very easy to keep. You don't even really need to feed them that much, but they'll just pull stuff out of the water. And just behind the Scolies, we have some hammer corals to the right, and then some Duncans to the left. And then in between the Scolies and the hammer is a Favia. It's called the Goblins Rage, and it is a incredibly interesting colored coral. The rim of it is kind of a yellowish color, and then there's a slight red, and then the mouths are a kind of a neon green. Then here in the front glass we have some corals that I've been kind of separating from the pack, stuff that I'm going to start working into the frag tank. We have some Zoanthids, some Recordias, some Blastos, and then towards the back, kind of out of focus right now, there is a Sophastria. That's the third one, which looks like it's doing okay, but it's definitely not growing at the scale as that other one is. And then between those corals right here, we have another chalice, a fire and ice chalice. Just behind all that towards the back, we have some more acans. We have the baby Interstellar mushroom, which is starting to get some dots. Behind the Duncan, there's some more candy canes. A Recordia that's there, that's doing really well. A very neon green Sinulera, which I've been trying out some soft corals in here, seeing how they're doing. Just to the left of that, we have the blue Xenia, which completely took over my 55 gallon aquarium, and I made some decent money because way back when that stuff was selling pretty heavily. Just behind that we have a Gorgonian, which is a very vivid purple with a, I would say, a light brown polyp. Interesting coral. I definitely appreciate them. I probably couldn't have a reef tank without one of those in it because they're just a absolutely beautiful coral. Now, I made mention in a video not that long ago where I was talking about having a coral that I have not had since the 55-gallon aquarium, and that time has come to reveal what that coral is. And it is a soft coral that takes up a good amount of space depending on, you know, how well it does. As we pan up here, we'll take a look at what it is. And I bought a toadstool leather, a good sized toadstool leather for the Waterboxx. Crown leathers are absolutely gorgeous. They can get really big, and there's some interesting things about them that you need to take in consideration when you're keeping them. This guy wasn't really cheap, and it's kind of interesting because when I had my first tank, I had crown leather in it, and it was a very inexpensive coral. This guy, even though, I mean, I'm paying for size too with this coral, but the idea is to let him get decent sized. This whole rock which he's attached to is going to be kind of a soft coral rock, and I'm going to let him grow and we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll put some zoanthids down there as well. I still am not settled on the aquascape of this tank, but he is definitely going to be a focus point of the Waterboxx. And as you can see, got good polyp extension. Camera's not really picking up. He really has some beautiful light green polyps, and the crown itself is almost a purple hue and coloration, so it's a really interesting contrast in the coloration. Took him a couple days to open up, but he's doing pretty well in the Waterboxx. And just to the right of him, we have a couple of rocks that are holding some other interesting corals. Corals that have been featured in previous top 10 lists, but they haven't been. Actually, I may have put one of them. Well, actually, there's two different variations, but just to the back, there's some type of tabling acro that has been really getting thick, but hasn't really done a whole lot of growing, and it's been one of the first corals that was added to the tank. Just in front of him, there's a Favia Coral, or Cactus Coral, or whatever you want to call it, which we're kind of looking forward to seeing what's going to turn up with him. And just to the right of him, we have a plum purple, which has got some really crazy polyps going on, some crazy extension. And then in between the two, there's another Goniopora that's been in the tank for a couple months now and been doing pretty well. So with the exception of a couple corals that have fallen in the back and the big red lobo that has been in the tank for a while now, that really is all of the corals that are in the 70.3 Waterboxx. So this video is probably going on long enough. We're gonna wrap it up here. If you guys have any questions about any of these corals, shoot me a message. If you're interested in purchasing any of these corals, jump over to mrbshop.com. Some of them are listed, some of them aren't listed yet. The ones that are in the tank that you potentially are interested in purchasing that are not on the site yet, shoot me a message. I'm probably going to be doing 2 more orders and listing some of it on the website, but a lot of it's going to be going to the frag show that I'm going to be going to in October. That's a wrap on all of my corals in the 70.3 Waterboxx aquarium. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you hit the thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. That's going to do it for today. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time right here with a brand new video.